good to see all of you again. Today we're discussing something very key and very important during wellness, in the wellness segment. Now, in the past couple of weeks, we've thrown the focus on other areas. Today, we're looking purely at the issue of panic attacks. What are panic attacks, and are they common? What are the causes? How do we manage them? And how do we possibly also prevent them? Have you been a victim of a panic attack before? Have you suffered a panic attack before? Now, we're doing all of this in context because we're building up to what will be a major electioneering exercise. And it's very important that we get some of these, some of these health issues, in place, especially as many people are going to be taking part in the exercise, from the voting end, from those of you who are going to go onto the grounds to make sure you wrap up the campaign in a very good way so that the message goes down to the barest minimum. So would want to throw focus on this. Now, here with me today are two known faces here on this set because of their participation in major discussions, and they'll be helping us to understand this better and place this in context better. All right, so Dr. Desmond Akwe-Alote is my guest here. He is a medical doctor with the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital. And also Seth Asafo is a psychologist, a certified psychologist here with me in the studio. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, today we're moving the conversation from pro-men to something that affects men and women.
Yeah. But Nat, you brought my lecture on the set. I'm intimidated. My lecture, so much pressure. Say I salute.
It happens sometimes, I have some friends in the law school who say, there are some situations where you go to court and you meet your lecturer and you have to battle him. Sometimes you win against him, and sometimes it's not very comfortable. Yeah. Well, we know that all your project work and everything is intact because he won't go back to withdraw them. So you're
Thank you for the reassurance. I'm humbled.
Panic attacks. Let's get to understand it first of all. Let's begin from from the pure medical point of view.
Okay. So basically, panic attack is a sudden response to fear. Fear being an emotion, a strong emotion or an unpleasant emotion of a perceived or an actual threat. So with panic attacks, you actually respond to these fears, and you respond to them by exhibiting physical symptoms. Like, for instance, chest pain. Somebody is afraid, and all of a sudden starts complaining of chest pain, sweating, palpitations, your heart keeps racing, fast breathing. So most of these things are mainly from the mind because there's a part of your brain that tells you this is a fearful condition, or this is a situation you have to be careful about. It's important. It's because if you are just there, you cannot respond to fear. A lion will just walk and you'll be there to devour you. So some amount of fear, some amount of anxiety is okay. But when you have extreme forms of these ones and you have physical symptoms that impair your life, they affect your quality of life, they change your behavior, then it becomes a problem. So panic attacks, they are sudden, they usually do not have, the triggers are non-threatening. They are ordinary situations. If somebody just sees a red flag and just starts having palpitation, starts sweating. So it can be very, it can affect your quality of life and can be distressing. So these things are there. Now, when you have these attacks as part of a disorder, so once in a while you can, you have this, you're afraid, you have to meet a deadline, those things, they are normal. But when it becomes part of a problem where you are experiencing it more often than usual, it's like more than a month you are experiencing these symptoms, it's affecting your work, it's affecting your life, it's affecting your day-to-day, then it becomes a problem.
Doc, it's interesting you're raising this part and giving us this very technical explanation. I find myself operating with projects when it comes to events execution, and I'm on the end of, event hosting and all of that. And they always say, and I meet all sorts of individuals who have this disconnect between the backstage and the front of the stage. Performers from various ends of the value chain, musicians, people who have to make speeches and all of that. And like you said, some become regular and it becomes a chronic thing. Seth, you've been seeing this. You've been meeting people who suffer this on a regular basis. Well, we're not too sure what the triggers are. We've gotten an explanation, but is it a thing with individuals and how they receive stimulus around them, or it's just a thing? It's just a natural thing that comes because there is a certain atmosphere. There's a certain situation. So because of that, people will are susceptible to that kind of behavior.
Very good question. So there's a yes and no, and it may be so scenario.
Okay.
Which is to say, yes, there are risk factors. For instance, if you have a family member who suffered panic attacks in the past, you have an almost 40% of also developing a panic attack, especially if it's a first-degree relationship. Now, for people that have also been exposed to adverse life conditions, like trauma in the past, they're also susceptible to panic attacks. And then for people who are consuming psychoactive substances, caffeine is one of them, are also susceptible. You see, the reality of panic attacks is panic attacks can also be a way that the body communicates. The mind communicates to the body. Now, the mind does not have the same resources to say, I'm struggling, like the body. So the body will tell you because you start feeling pain. You start feeling weakness. You have a blister. So those things tell you, you've got to do something, I'm struggling. Now, the mind, on the other hand, cannot tell you directly. So what it does is it piles on the stresses. So all the things that are happening are being piled on. And at some point, it has to communicate to you to take action. And that's where the panic attacks come in. So it borrows the resources of the body, which is physically the palpitations, the rapid breathing, the flashness, the feeling of faintness. Sometimes you might also have digestive related issues, like feeling like you have to pass stool. To say you have to do something, that's what typically happens. So for the risk factors, anybody can suffer a panic attack. In fact, the research tells us that about 35% of people will suffer a panic attack in some part of their life. And these are usually not triggered. But I always say the human brain contains, just like a hard drive, plenty gig of information. Sure. There are things that you've gone through that were pleasant, things that were unpleasant, etc., etc. Now, all these things are there. And when you walk through your environment, your brain hits trigger points. So let's say I suffered an accident or I saw an accident. Every time I'm driving, subconsciously, my brain is triggering car accident, traffic light accident, horn accident, which starts to activate the body's survival system. So like he was saying, the fear response is also the body's survival system. Technically, they call it the fight or flight system. And once it starts, and I always talk about fight or flight like a seesaw. So look at it as a balance. When one goes up, the other goes down. Now, the fight system is awareness in many respects, and the down system is the calmness system. Whenever the calmness system is down and the awareness system is up, your body can go into an overdrive, because what interprets fear starts to overreact. It starts to give signals that are not true. And this could be real or even imagined.
All right, so let's bring some real scenarios here and some very, practical scenarios. Just a couple of days ago, we heard the unfortunate news of something that was a kidnap of a lady who's a airport services manager for one of the big airlines at the airport. Within the space of a couple of hours, they said that the Ghana Police Service had found her. Now, so with what he's explaining as well, there's a very high likelihood that an individual like that who has been kidnapped then will have difficulties relating to any similar situation. So if, for instance, it was getting to closing time and it happened, subsequently, any day it's coming to closing time, that happens. Is that the case, Doc?
Yeah, so for these conditions, everyone has their own thresholds of responding to some of these events. So if you have an acute stress disorder like an accident or any issue that is traumatic, you have your response. Some may go overdrive, as my boss is saying. So it depends on your response and the severity of the aftermath of the symptoms. So trauma-related stress is very common. I mean, we can all go through one form of stress or traumatic events or the other, but you need to seek expert help whenever you go through these episodes so that you respond well to them or you don't go overdrive and it will end up becoming a big problem to you. So anytime, I always say that everybody needs a psychologist. Even the psychologist himself also needs a psychologist. Yeah. Because we can all break down, we can all go through traumatic events, we can all go through stresses. So anytime you go through such things, seek expert help so that you know that you are being managed properly, you are in professional hands, and then you don't react in a way that will affect you in the future.
Let's get into managing, panic attacks proper. There are those who are suffering. And another thing we're discussing off air as well was how, in this side of the world, we don't place much premium on, mental health. And there are many people who suffer these panic attacks. First of all, don't even know that they're suffering panic attacks. There are those who have it, it's recurring, and they because of lack of information, they don't know. Now, how then do we bridge that gap and ensure that we're helping people to manage this?
Yeah. I think the first thing is even talking about it just, brings it to light. The most significant thing about panic attacks is they occur a lot with fear-related things. So if you look at most of anxiety disorders, one of the key features of any anxiety disorder is a panic attack. Now, for people that suffer panic attacks, their chief worry is the fear of suffering another panic attack. So it's not, you're not going to see an actual trigger, like a gun, but the thought of, and because it's very uncomfortable, you just imagine that we're live on air now, and then suddenly you start to feel that intense feeling of choking. And your mind then starts, so if I do this on TV, how is... So then that worry still sparks up that survival system. So for many people, that survival system or the fear response is activated consistently, even whether they want it or not, because it's happening in the background. They fear the discomfort so much that it will consistently show. Now, if you ask what people can do,
To hold it there, I'm very interested in what people can do, and I'm sure that Doc also has some to add to it. We're still here having this conversation. We'll do a round of messages, and then after that, we'll continue the conversation about what people can do here with Seth Asafo, who's a clinical psychologist, and also Dr. Desmond Ni Akwe Alote. You stay with us. Well, the subject here this morning is panic attacks, and I'm sure that you've learned quite a bit. Now, we want to zoom in on the conversation around managing it and making sure that when that occurs, you are on top of it or you're able to go around it as much as possible. We ended on your point. You're making the point about the management.
So there are many ways of managing. Medication, of course, is one. Speaking to your psychologist, another. But I want to talk about what you can do in the moment when you're going through a panic attack. Now, notice that I mentioned earlier about the human survival system or our alarm system. And it's usually activated when your heart starts to beat, so when you're getting palpitations and when you're breathing in a lot. Now, when you're hyperventilating, what the body is saying is we're in danger. So we need to put together resources. So breathing in much faster gives the body more energy to perform a certain task, to evade the danger. Now, the reality is, when you're having a panic attack, when these two systems are online, then the brain says there's danger. So what we try to do is to help people deactivate those two systems using a simple process of breathing. So you can breathe to deactivate your survival system. Now, the simplest is what we call the physiological sigh, and this is how it's done. You take one deep breath, like this, and then you top it up, and then you let out longer. That's simply it.
That's simple.
It's that simple, but you have to take in two. So the first one fills the lungs. The second one fills the little pockets on the lung called the alveoli. And the more you dissipate carbon dioxide, the more the body starts to calm down. Now, for every kind of breathing technique for relaxation or deactivation, the exhales are longer. So, if you're a sports person and you need to get a quick burst of energy, you have to take in more inhales and less exhales, or shorter exhales. So that's what we do in many panic attack situations. Second thing is making people recognize what they think will happen. That's anticipatory anxiety. So in many panic attacks, people believe they will die. The way they are feeling, they feel they will die. So that also sets a second cycle of anxiety. But recognizing that what is happening is just temporal also helps. Then I tell people, when you have panic attacks, be careful about paying attention to physical sensations. So many people who have panic attacks, the moment they have an itch somewhere, they interpret it to mean something more serious. And usually it's not. So it has to do with recognizing that these things are not as life-threatening as you think they are, and using the breathing techniques also.
Well, breathing technique indeed. That's what you'd have to start learning about. It's a very simple exercise. Once you get used to it, it helps a great deal. This is according to Seth Asafo, who is our clinical psychologist. Doc, he's mentioned medication, but I'm sure, of course...
So basically, I mean, if you have some of these symptoms and you report, we have to make a diagnosis, okay? Because we have to be able to make sure that we don't have any other problems. Like, so somebody has chest pain, it could be a heart attack as well. So when you see the doctor, he will make the assessments and know that, from history examination, I think we have to do these labs or these tests to rule out these problems and be sure that it's pure panic attack. Because panic attack can be associated with other problems like mood disorders, anxiety disorders, substance use, psychotic disorders. So we have to be sure that it's really a panic attack and it's temporary. Then we can give you the proper care. So some of these conditions, you want to rule out a heart attack, for instance. You do your ECG, your labs that will tell you that it's not it. It's not it. They are medications. So it depends on the severity of the symptoms and how you respond to it. So the psychological component is there. That's the non-pharmacological, and then we have the pharmacological method. So for the non-pharmacological, that's, as my boss said, we have different exposure therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, just talking. Then the medication, we have anti-anxiety drugs that we can use, and the benzodiazepines that can calm you down. So basically, seek expert help when you have these problems.
Well, what a note to wrap it up on. Seek expert help when you have these problems. I'm sure we're going to have a second installment of this conversation. But gentlemen, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for the education. Dr. Desmond Niakwe Alote is a medical officer with the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital, and Seth Asafo is a certified clinical psychologist. Thank you so much for watching the show. We'll be back tomorrow to bring you the midweek edition with so much more in terms of excitement to bring you. You stay well. Always keep it here. Get to our social media handles and get some of the interviews you missed out on. Keep it here on Prime Morning. And thanks so much for the whole production team. My name is Nathaniel Atto. Have a wonderful day.